Well, good morning and welcome to the Rivers online worship experience. My name is Dean Ward and I serve as the lead pastor of the River Church, and I am so grateful that you have chosen to join in with us here today. Now, you'll notice that I'm wearing red. Now, the ladies in the crowd that aren't Taylor Swift fans might be thinking I'm wearing it because this is Valentine's Day week, right? I mean, Valentine's Day is this Wednesday. By the way, if you're planning on coming to small group this Wednesday night, February 14th at the River in New Kensington, we will not be there because we're taking the week off for Valentine's Day. So maybe you're thinking that's why I'm wearing red, and would be an appropriate reason. But actually, I'm wearing red just to support the team that I am pulling for in this week's Super Bowl. And so I hope that this week, this Sunday, this day, you get to enjoy the final game of the 2023 football season and all the excitement that it has. And I will be cheering along with my in-laws and family around me. Looking forward to the commercials, looking forward to the game and the action on the field, looking on the over-under every number of times they'll show Taylor Swift in the stands, in the luxury box. So we're going to have a great time today watching the game, but before that, we're going to have a great time right now filming. Now, you may be asking where we are filming. We are filming today under the New Kensington Bridge. Now, if you live in and around New Kensington, you will know that this bridge has been under construction for quite some time. And I came down today looking for an outside spot to film and found that under the bridge looked spectacular. I mean, it's almost all done under here. The trusses and the steel is, rust is removed, structurally it's sound, and it's painted my favorite color, blue. Maybe in respect to PNC Park with the blue and the tan, down here we're blue with gray. So that's where we're filming, and we hope that you enjoy this message today. Hey, just to let you know, we are in part 2 of our sermon series called Future Family. And I wanted just to point out that in the 12 years that Mark Helzel and I have been collaborating together on our sermons and messages, that 99.5% of the time, we put together our own material, write our own messages, but from time to time, we find something that is so helpful that we want to share it that someone else has put together. And such is the case with this series of messages just called Future Family. Andy Stanley at North Point Church preached this series of messages, I believe, 12 years ago. And yet it's so helpful and so beneficial. We wanted to share it with you leading up to this springtime and through Valentine's Day and in the month of February. So let's jump right in. If you'll remember, last week we started the series, and by the way, in case you're wondering what the sermon title is, it's called Power Down. The question that changes everything. Power down. The question that changes everything. We'll get there in a moment. Last week, we began the series on family, and we ended the message with this dilemma of the ideal compared to the real. We talked about how Jesus calls us to live this ideal of marriage and family out, and how so often we fall short and get discouraged that we're not able to live our real lives up to the ideal. The reality is we come from less than ideal families, and we want something better for our children. But better implies that family dynamics could be better. And we live in a culture that doesn't like not measuring up. We live in a culture that pushes back against feeling less than. So we tend to be drawn toward the temptation to normalize everything, regardless if we feel bad about it or realize we're not living up to the ideal. The problem with normalizing everything is that we dumb everything down and give future generations nothing to strive for, nothing to shoot for. I mean, after all, everybody should get a trophy, right? This summer in June, we will be celebrating my in-laws' 65th wedding anniversary. Now, I added up how old I'm going to have to live to be married 65 years to Leslie, and I just want to ask that you pray for her, because 65 years with me is more than anybody should ever have to put up with. But they live the ideal. They love each other deeply and cherish each other tremendously. And they are encouragement to so many of us that want to have that kind of love. And I know that we want to have that kind of love, even if we're tempted to look at and say, well, I'm not going to shoot that high. I know that we want that kind of love in our lives because when we think about our children and our grandchildren and what we want for them, do we just say, well, just don't strive for anything that may be very out there, just settle. No, we want the absolute best for our children. We want the absolute best for our grandchildren. And Jesus invites us to reach for the ideal, to keep our eyes on that goal, and yet he refuses to condemn us for living in the real and brings forgiveness and available to all of us for where we fall short. And this is the tension that we are invited to live in. Are we willing to embrace a standard that so many of us have fallen or will fall short of, or will we redefine terms until we feel good about where we are? Are we willing to aim our children toward a destination we never reached, or will we just simply redefine normal? Well, here's the answer. As Jesus followers, for those of us that follow Christ, we don't have a choice. We are called to pursue the ideal that he calls us to relationally. So for the next 5 weeks in this series, we're going to look at the ideal within the context of a less than ideal world. Now, there are a few good examples of family in the Old Testament. We can see this in the book of Ruth, where loyalty is on display. We can see some good family dynamics in the book of Esther. But pretty much in the rest of the Old Testament, you'll be hard-pressed to find a great example of family. But there is specific teaching in the New Testament that may seem odd and old-fashioned to us, but when it was given 2,000 years ago, it was revolutionary. First century people could not imagine a world where women would have equal status to men, where children would not be thrown away because they were inconveniences, or where baby girls shared the same dignity as baby boys. Only in Christian culture and cultures that embrace a Judeo-Christian ethic do you find this kind of value today. So as we summarized last week, the teaching in the New Testament relationally related to families can be summed up like this. Husband, Love, treasure, and cherish your wives. Be considerate of them. Wives, submit to your husbands. Children, obey your parents. Fathers, don't exasperate your children. As we move forward, we're going to pivot off one of the most controversial New Testament teachings regarding marriage. One of these four declarations and teachings regarding married relationships has come under great fire in the world. Can you, looking at this list, zoom down and focus in on the one teaching that is most controversial, that maybe even women struggle with more than any of the other teachings? Yes, you got it. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. Now, one of the things that's fascinating to me as a pastor is when husbands will come to me to try to get their wives to obey this commandment. They'll come to me and say, Pastor Dean, isn't it right that wives are supposed to submit to their husbands? Now, it's always interesting when they do this, because I want to say, well, what is the first word in this verse? And if they can't pull it out, I'll point it out to them. The first word in this verse is wives. Paul is talking to women. So how about if you let your wife deal with this verse, and we'll find a verse that starts with husband, because this verse isn't written to you. Women, I got your back. Wives, I got your back here. So often we want to take Scripture and use it to control other people. Men, don't do this when it comes to this verse, because God has a lot to say to you as husbands. This verse is extraordinary, and most people miss this, so don't miss this. This verse is extraordinarily important because it's an application given to women of a command given to everyone. This verse is an application given to women of a command given to everyone. Peter and Paul were drawing from the teachings of Jesus and applying them to family. Paul watched Jesus' use of power and drew from it perhaps the most powerful relational teaching of all, an instruction that changes family, which he gave in the verse preceding this one. So for those of you that struggle with verse 22, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, let's see what Paul says right before that in verse 21 of Ephesians 5. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, often we read that and just read right on through it and then get caught up on the next verse when he's talking to women. But the command for all of us is to submit to each other. And we are to do this out of reverence for Christ, not out of reverence for each other. I mean, if we were called to do this out of reverence for each other when each other deserved reverence, how often would we be off the hook from obeying this command? Because we don't always deserve reverence or to be revered, because often we fall short. But we are called to live this passage out of submitting to each other out of our reverence for Christ. He introduces the principle of doing for one another what Christ did for you. As your powerful Savior leveraged all his power for your benefit and put you first ahead of himself, died for your sin instead of requiring you to die for your sin, and everything that follows is an application of this. Perhaps Paul's words in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 8 will help us understand better how we're called to mutually submit to each other as Christ became the servant of all. Verse 3 says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross." May you and I live in our relationships with each other, in our family and in our home, with that type of submissive spirit, serving each other, loving each other, valuing each other, leveraging all that is at our capacity for the benefit of others in our family, to help them and bless them. Hey, I want to give you a picture of what this looks like in just a simple video called "Love is for Losers." Now, I think you'll enjoy this video because the narrator has either a British or an Australian accent. I'm not sure which is which, and everything sounds just so much better in a British accent, don't you think? Let's enjoy this video together.
We live in a culture in which losing is the enemy. We go to workplaces where everyone is battling for the boss's favour in the next promotion. Or we stay at home where the battle for the Legos is just as fierce. Nightly, we watch the talking heads trying to win the battle of ideas, although sometimes they seem quite willing to settle for winning the battle of decibels. We fight to have the best stuff, we fight through traffic, and when we finally look at each other at the end of the day, we fight, because we've been trained to do nothing else. In the worst of cases, we grew up fighting for our very survival, both physically and emotionally. But even in the best of situations, we found ourselves trying to win the competition for our parents' attention and approval, for our peers' acceptance, and for the validating stamp of a world with one message: win. But Christ calls us to do most things backwards from what the world and our flesh are telling us. That's why if marriage is going to work, it needs to become a mutual and reciprocal contest to see which spouse is going to lose the most. In marriage, losing is letting go of the need to fix everything for your partner, listening to their darkest parts with a heartache rather than a solution. It's being even more present in the painful moments than in the good times. It's finding ways to be humble and open, even when everything in you says that you're right and they're wrong. It's knowing that your spouse will never fully understand you, will never truly love you unconditionally, because they are a broken creature too, and loving them to the end anyway. If you're going to make marriage a competition, compete over which spouse will lose the most. Imagine a marriage like this. When the baby cries, both spouses race out of the bedroom door, bumping into each other in the hallway, just so the other one can rest. When one spouse is having a bad day, he or she still finds ways to make life easier for their partner. Each spouse deliberately places the other's calendar and career ahead of their own. No marriage is perfect, but in this kind of marriage, a decision has been made, and two people have decided to love each other to the limit and to sacrifice the most important thing of all, themselves. In these marriages, losing becomes a way of life, a competition to see who can listen to, care for, serve, forgive, and accept the other the most. The marriage becomes a competition to see who can give of themselves in ways that most increase the dignity and strength of the other. These marriages form people who can be small, humble, merciful, loving, and peaceful. Maybe what we need, really, is to become a bunch of losers in a world that is being torn apart by the competition to win. If we did that, maybe we'd be able to sleep a little easier at night, look our loved ones in the eyes, and forgive and forget. Love is for losers, for those willing to put themselves second. Love like Jesus. Choose to lose.
Now, wouldn't you agree? Everything sounds better in that accent, just has more authority to it, more appeal to it. I wish I could fake that kind of accent just so people would pay better attention to the words that I'm teaching. No, I'm kidding. I'm quite happy with my Pittsburgh accent in that. All right. So the video and this message encourages us to live with a mutual submission to each other. Now, Christian families should be characterized by this. It should be what they're known for. They give to each other. They bless each other. They help each other. They surrender their time and effort and energy to pull for each other and to give to each other. However, if you're not a follower of Jesus and you don't claim to bear the name of Christ, it's okay. You don't have to follow this teaching, but I would like to invite you to give it a try. Take it home and try it on for size, because you can have a better family following these principles, whether you're a believer or not. The message of mutual submission says, I'm here for you, regardless of your place in our family. If you're a child, if you're a spouse, if you're a sibling, if you're a parent, if you're an in-law, if you're a grandparent, if you're an aunt, you're an uncle. The assumption of mutual submission is this: you are no less valuable than me. Your agenda, your desires, your wants for your family and in your life are no less valuable than my desires and agendas and wants. While our roles and responsibilities differ, nobody has less value. So the question that mutual submission asks is just simply this, and we're going to practice this question. You ready? What can I do to help? What can I do to help? This is the single most powerful question that you can ask to unlock health and life in your family. So let's try saying this question together. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Wait, I didn't quite hear you. I'll say it with you this time. 1, 2, 3. What can I do to help? Now, if you're watching this at home by yourself, go ahead and say it on your own. If your family's around, you might want to wait till after the sermon and say it sometime later, because they may give you a list right when you ask this during the message, and we won't want that to get interrupted. The beauty of this question is that it is an offer to loan your power, your resources, your strength, your abilities, your bandwidth for someone else's benefit. It is an offer to come under and submit to the burden of someone else is carrying. Now, I grew up in a home with a mother that lived with this kind of energy, and a father as well. What can I do to help? And it took a long time for me to start asking this question in my family. But I'm asking it in spades now, and more committed to living with this kind of helpful attitude than ever before in my life. And it's a game changer. So kids, the reality is you have no idea how powerful this question is to your parents. I want to invite you kids to start asking this question at home. Mom, Dad, what can I do to help? Now, the fascinating thing is they will be so stunned when you ask them this question that they will most likely say, right now I don't have anything, so you're free to do what you want. You can go up and play on your video game or do whatever you want. There's a chance that asking this question to your parents could become so disruptive to your family system that in a very short time, they will be so entranced by you asking this question that you can have control of your family running it as you see fit. Okay, little tongue-in-cheek there. But it's a powerful question. If you really want to blow your parents' minds, ask them this question when they have friends over for dinner, maybe a dinner gathering. Ask them in front of their friends. Come downstairs and say, hey, Mom, Dad, is there anything I can do to help? And they'll be like, no, I think we're okay. And you can go back upstairs. After you go back upstairs, the other adults, the other parents at the table will say, we're not worthy. How do you learn to parent like that? And they will put your parents on a pedestal wanting advice from them. It's a powerful, powerful question. Husbands, you ask this of your wife, and she may flat out pass out. She may be like, what did you just ask me? Wives, your husband will say nothing. No, I don't need help. I got it. I'm good. But it will touch his soul. Parents, ask this question every day. Ask this question to your children every day, because if you don't, the downward drift of parent-children conversations will tend to be negative. Have you done this? Why don't you do this? Sometimes I take an inventory of my conversation with my children who are adults now that still live under my home, a couple of them, and I have to guard them not being negative. Why didn't you take the trash out when it's supposed to go? Why didn't you unload the dishwasher? Why didn't you do this? Why did you let your car get so low on gas? Why did on and on? Last night, did you know we were out of milk? Why didn't you tell me we were out of milk? That's just the natural drift. Instead, saying, hey, what can I do to help? So guess what? When there was no milk last night, and my son didn't tell me that he finished it, guess what I did? Just went to the local convenience store and paid 3 times as much for a gallon of milk than I would have at Aldi. But we had milk, and it was helpful. This is a powerful question. Say it with me again. There you go. Way to go. Way to go. So, do you know why we don't ask this question? Oh, I know why. Because we're afraid. We're afraid that if we ask this question, we will be taken advantage of. We will be used and abused. Kids don't ask this question because they're afraid you're going to make them go out and wash your car. We don't ask this question because we're afraid of the answer that we'll get. We're afraid people will take advantage of us. Exactly. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. But what you don't know is this: that something is the thing that makes families great. That commitment to mutually submit to each other, to ask each other how we can help, to leverage everything that we have and are to help someone that's struggling in our family, that is what makes families great. That is the game changer. By withholding the question, you're withholding the very thing you wish for. Like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, walking around with her ruby red slippers saying, I want to go home, I want to go home, and want to go home, and has no idea that she already has the power in that story to get home by clicking her red slippers together. This is the red slippers. Submitting to each other, offering to help each other, leveraging what you are and what you have to help lift what someone else needs help with, unlocks the very family dynamics that you have been craving for your soul. And men, let me just camp out with you for a second, because we don't do this because we're stinking selfish. We think we have to live our lives large and in charge, mandating and dictating to everybody in our family to do what we want them to do. We would never ask this question of them because it would make us appear weak and less than. Why would we ever do that? Well, when you don't ask this question, you are failing to lean in. I bet some of you have wives that have been leaning in and leaning in and leaning in and leaning in to the point that they have fallen over, trying to help and bless you, trying to help your family be strong and healthy. Guys, let's lean in. Let's lean into our children's lives. I remember when my kids started playing sports, I had parents that worked, and most of my school sports at a small Christian school were during the day. My parents did not come to watch me play football and basketball at the Christian school I went to because they worked. So I show up in New Kensington, my kids start playing sports, and my wife's like, let's go. I'm like, what do you mean let's go? It's just a practice. We're going to watch them. Wait, we're going to watch them practice? Yes, we're going to watch them practice. And then we're going to go watch every game. I'm like, every game? Like, how? What about my life? What about what? She goes, Dean, you need to know this. We're going to do this. And I submitted to her call to parent better, and I have never regretted it. You're withholding yourself. You're withholding you from the relationship. And if you do that, something will always be missing. The happiness that you want so badly will be elusive for you forever until you start to live with a submissive attitude, yielding, valuing, loving, treasuring, giving, helping, as a spouse, as a husband, as a parent, as a sibling. This question forces you to lean in, not away. Selfless people are happier people. When parents and their kids embrace selflessness, everybody is happier. This is contagious. Now, you may be asking a question. Well, does this mean that no one is the ultimate authority at home? Does this mean that we all just stand around and say, no, you have the first piece of chicken. No, you take the biggest piece of chicken. No, I really want you to have it. And we stand around arguing about who's going to get the first piece of chicken until the chicken gets cold. And mama ain't happy that we have cold chicken now. No, this has nothing to do with authority. This has everything to do with the power at your disposal that you power down and leverage to bless and help those in your family. This was modeled by our authority, Jesus Christ, who, when he was the most powerful person in the room, washed the disciples' feet. And when the disciples got out of line, he rebuked them, and then he died for them. This is not about abdicating authority or position. It's about leveraging authority and power properly. Jesus applied his power, his influence and his resources to our greatest point of need. He asked, "What can I do to help?" Listen to how this played out in Romans chapter 5, verse 6. "For while we were still helpless," meaning we were weak and incapacitated, we needed help. At the right time, at just the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For those, who are the ungodly? Well, those who take unfair advantage of his offer. Those who ignore his offer and see it as a loophole, saying, "See ya, I'll see you when I'm older or when I need something." They know better, but they do it anyways, and then ask him for help when the bottom drops out. Who are the ungodly? Me and you. Before we come to Christ in our lives, for sure. Verse 7, "For one will hardly die for a righteous man, though perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates, God shows his love for us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us." He leveraged his power, his position, his perfection to be the ultimate sacrifice for you and for me. And if you've never come to terms with that, if you've never responded to the invitation of grace and salvation and life through Jesus Christ, I invite you in this moment, may this verse be your verse right now. May today be the day that you give your life to Christ, calling on his name, saying, "I need your help. I have failed. I have sinned. Will you forgive and save me? I accept your gift of salvation and life through your death on the cross and your resurrection." Jesus has life for your soul, and Jesus has life for your family. What can I do to help? When you want to ask this question the least is when we need to ask this question the most. God bless you, everybody. I look forward to being with you next week when we look at why we have conflict in our families and what we can do about it. God bless you, everybody. Have a great week.